Play as an original character which can be customized to your liking, and that game that you should buy with money. You can mess around with if you feel like it. Please play it. I had an idea for a game to record and do a video on, but I want to do that one justice. So, this is it. We're finally doing this. I love the Somnium files. I don't have a witty or clever way to ease into this. You've seen it on this channel with me peppering in references to the game in all sorts of videos. Heck, even before I started doing these traditional videos, I was posting a set out of context and other Somnium shitposts well before the game actually came out. On Twitter, I've been even less subtle. 2019, I hardly ever shut up about the game, not during the wacky weekly uploads from the ARG, and not after the game actually released. Kotaro Uchikoshi made sure that he left Spike Chunsoft with a bang, and I have no hesitation saying that the game that came from that is one of my favorite games ever. But in all that time, I've never really explained why I love I refrained from posting on social media after finishing the game so that others can enjoy the story blind. I wanted to write a Metacritic review after that whole fiasco, and I even wanted to do a video on well before I got cold feet and decided to make one about that pesky blue hedgehog. In a way, I guess a big chunk of my internet presence these past 2 years has all been leading up to this. It's time. I've said it before and I'm gonna say it again, and I'll keep saying it. You should buy the Somnium files with money. And I'll finally add on another part. Here's why. Because I'm sure there's some people here who aren't familiar with most of what I just said, I'll give a bit of background info. This is Kotaro Uchikoshi, and he owns my ass. He's had his hands on a lot of fantastic stuff, the most prominent of them being the Zero Escape trilogy, which are also amazing and you should play them too. That series came to an end back in 2016, and next on the docket was the Somnium Files, announced as Project Sync back in 2017. To hype this game up, there was even this gigantic ARG starring a character from the game, A Set You Bet. Weekly uploads for 6 months, and hundreds of tweets from various Twitter accounts, and it was some really good stuff. I would do a video exclusively about the ARG if some people hadn't already done a far better job than I ever could. But for now, all you need to know is that you don't need any familiarity with Zero Escape or the ARG to enjoy the Somnium Files. And good thing too, because that makes much easier to sell than trying to convince people on an entire trilogy of games. I'll get to Zero Escape later, don't you worry, but for right now, let's just get along with On a rainy Friday night in November, the body of a woman is found tied to a merry-go-round in an abandoned amusement park. The cause of death was via stabbing with a thin, ice pick-like object, and her left eye is hollowed out, likely removed before death. Special Agent Kaname Date is brought onto the investigation due to his relationship with the victim, and alongside his AI partner Aiba, he's tasked to find the truth behind the murder, utilizing Aiba's functions and the sync machine, which allows the user to enter a subject's dreams. I know that isn't a lot to work off of, but to say anything more about the story of would be spoiling it, and I'll be caught dead before I spoil an Uchikoshi game. What I can say is this: if you're someone who was turned off by the writing in Zero Time Dilemma, don't fret. Uchikoshi is back on his game, and the story of is leaps and bounds better than what that game had going. If you've never played an Uchikoshi game before, then, oh boy, you are not prepared for what's about to go down. If you ever think you know what's going on, you're either dead wrong, or you're only half right, and the game will constantly keep surprising you with its many twists and turns, and it expertly juggles its tone, knowing when it's safe to make a joke, and when it has to dial back so that the scene lands. It's masterfully written, managing to hide its secrets in plain sight, and managing to make every reveal a shock, while still making perfect sense with what's been presented to you. Is a much more down-to-earth story than the Zero Escape series, but it's no less ambitious in both its presentation and its scope, and I find that best conveyed in the cast. The characters of are amazing, I have no other way to put it. The cast is much larger than the simple 9 of the Zero Escape games, but they're no less sharply written. Granted, not everyone is given the same amount of screen time, but when they are given some, they make the absolute most of it, and the interactions between them are just really good. The main duo of Date and Aiba have some of the best chemistry, managing to play off of each other perfectly, and also managing to deliver some of the game's more comedic and heartfelt moments in stride.
Can I reach over and break that thing in half?
If you can pay for the damages.
Damn it.
But it's not just them. Mizuki is without a doubt my favorite character in the game, and her writing and interactions are just as sharp, and everyone else from Iris to Oda to Boss to Pewter all have their slam dunk moments, making the cast truly feel alive. And the designs too. Yusuke Kazaki was brought on for the character designs, and he really went off. Everybody looks fantastic, and I would love to cosplay someone from this game someday. And helping bring them to life is the voice acting. Ai has full voice acting, which is alone impressive, and features both English and Japanese voices. I can't say I'm familiar with the Japanese performances as I've never used that dub, but I can vouch for the English cast. They're all really good. Greg Chun kills it as Date, perfectly capturing both his serious and goofy sides, and Erica Harlicker clearly has a lot of fun as Aiba. Karina Becker is amazing as Mizuki. Her emotion behind her performance is god tier. Allegra Clark won me over from the very first trailer. Sean Chiplock is iconic in everything he's in, and everyone else is really solid as well. However, I have to give extra special mention to Jackie Lastra and Zach Aguilar, the voices of Iris and Oda respectively. They did more than just provide a good performance for the game, they brought Iris and Oda to life for the ARG, and they absolutely killed it. Oda's energy is perfectly captured, and Iris's is straight up infectious. To this day, I still remember almost every line from the ASET videos, primarily because of how they were delivered, and Jackie Lastra's cover of Invincible Rainbow Arrow is fantastic as well. It's just really good. Oh, and speaking of the music, that's great here too. Keisuke Ito is the composer, and man, I didn't think anything would top his Mystery Dungeon soundtracks, but here we are. Every track is phenomenal. Action scenes are intense and rocking. Investigation themes get you in the mood to solve this crime. The Somnium themes are mysterious yet match their respective themes perfectly. There are bubbly upbeat themes, there are somber and emotional themes, and the main theme, it's beautiful, mysterious, haunting, hypnotic, and some fifth word that isn't quite coming to mind. And it's right on the title screen, so you can tell right from the start that you'll be playing something you're never gonna forget. Graphically too, this game just looks absolutely stunning, especially when compared to what came before it. I will always respect the ambition behind Zero Time Dilemma's presentation, but man, we really have come a long way since Junpei's silly walk cycle. The models here are sharp, colorful, and expressive, and the animations are super fluid as well, and the environments carry the same level of detail and care, especially in the Somniums, where the surreal dreamscapes are conveyed beautifully through its visuals. Hell, even the UI is pretty. Look at the option menu, and look at this flowchart. Oh hey, that's where that corkboard texture came from. The only caveat here is the performance, which can occasionally take a small dip, especially on the Switch. For context, I'm playing on the PS4 version, but I've also played Ai on the Switch, and there especially some of the busier environments can cause the game to chug. With that said, the game runs perfectly when it matters the most, so it shouldn't be a major factor in deciding which version of the game to play. The gameplay itself is solid as well. Somnium Files is split into two distinct portions, Investigations and Somniums. Investigations make up the bulk of the game. Here you'll investigate both crime scenes and environments in pursuit of evidence and leads. It's all pretty simple. You move the cursor with the analog stick and select what you want to look at, and dialogue options are determined based on what you push on the D-pad. Once you check everything that the game wants you to look at, you'll be able to advance to the next area. To spice it up, there's Aiba's vision modes, which allow you to investigate using zooming, heat signatures, and x-rays. These are functionally the same, but they're a neat novelty and work as a good way to work Aiba into the normal gameplay. My only real complaint with these is that they can sometimes be hard to find what you need to interact with. The game doesn't have any sort of visual indicator telling you what can be interacted with, and while checking everything is recommended anyways, as that's where some of the funnier bits of dialogue are hiding, I think it would have helped if there was a scan mode, similar to what Danganronpa had.
Dangan?
Ronpa.
Is that how it's pronounced? Anyways, it wouldn't even be that hard to work in-universe. Aiba can already zoom in and perform x-rays. It shouldn't be too much of a stretch to imagine a mode that highlights objects of interest. With all that said though, it's not too major an issue. I can only think of 1 or 2 times that I got hung up trying to find the last bit of evidence. But I can see it rubbing some people the wrong way, so I figured I would mention it. The investigation portions are also peppered with QuickTime events. Oh boy. They're here so that they can flex the budget. That's really it. You have to push a button in time, you have to mash, you have to click a part of the screen in a certain amount of time, the basic stuff. If you mess them up, you're taken right back into it, so there isn't really a consequence for failure. With how few of them there isn't really much of a point to them being here, except, again, flexing. But they're entertaining to watch, though they are extremely ridiculous and have a tendency to break the tone. Entertaining at best, a little intrusive at worst, not much more to say there. But at some point, the trail's gonna go cold, the evidence will dry up, and a key suspect won't talk. But that's where the Somnium gameplay comes into play. Using the sync machine, you'll enter a subject's subconscious and use Aiba to explore their dreamscape, known as the Somnium. Your goal here is to interact with the objects scattered around in order to clear these mental locks so that you can advance. Clear them all and you'll finish the Somnium, gaining a new lead for the case. This is also where the story splits off. I has 5 endings, and which ones you get will depend on your choices in Somnium. Not all Somniums have branching paths, in fact most don't, but some do, and depending on what you do, you'll gain new information that can shift what will happen back in the real world. Keeping track of everything is pretty easy, as Uchikoshi's trademark flowchart is back in full force, doing a great job showing what you have and haven't done, and the Somniums have their own little chart on the side, letting you know where a branch can occur, making it pretty easy to get back in and see new stuff. With that said, actually getting through the Somniums isn't as simple. Because of the sync system, you can only spend 6 minutes in Somnium before it's game over. For those who dislike time limits in games, don't fret, as time only advances when you move, so you have plenty of time to think of a plan of attack. Interacting with objects also requires some thought. Each object has a number of options for how you'll interact with them. Some advance the Somnium, some are just for flavor text, but every action eats time, some more than others. To help you with this, there are the timies. By performing actions in Somnium, you'll obtain a timie, of which you can hold 3 at once. At any point, you can apply one of these to a choice, and they'll reduce the time used to perform that action, either by reducing it by a fraction or applying a flat rate. For example, by applying a 1/6 timie, you can turn a 60-second action into a 10-second action, or you can apply a 5-second timie to greatly reduce a 90-second action to a 5-second action. Not all timies are good though. There are also negative timies, which increase the amount of time an action takes, and are forced to use if you get your hands on one. Thus, Somniums become a balancing act of timies, trying to find positive timies to reduce the amount of time used on required actions, and finding short optional actions to burn negative timies on. Granted, finding what actions are required can also be a challenge. Remember that these are dreams, so they have their own internal logic on how things behave within them. Thus, the puzzles of I are also about trying to understand the logic of each Somnium, and figuring out which actions will solve the locks based on that. This is where a lot of people have split opinions on I. On one hand, because the logic is all over the place, that makes the solutions to puzzles random and potentially unsatisfying to find. On the other hand, I'm dumb as hell, and because these can be pretty easy to brute force, they aren't major obstacles that stand in the way of the story, unlike some of the escape rooms of Zero Escape. Helping in this is how forgiving I is. Running out of time is a game over, but the game saves checkpoints after every mental lock, and should you want to jump back, generally to clear it faster and get more time to work with, you can use one of the 3 jumps given to you. Should you run out of these, you'll have to start from the beginning, but even this isn't too bad. The skip function lets you speed through the actions and dialogue you've already seen, and the environments are usually so small that getting back to where you were should only take about a minute or 2. With that said, not all Somniums are winners. Some aren't terribly interesting visually, and some have some jank logic, but most of them are really good. The amusement park is such a good first Somnium, the warehouse is a classic, and I'll refrain from showing it, but there's one Somnium that managed to make me cry. If you know, you know. I guess that's a clean segue into talking about exactly why I love I. Honestly, 1 year later, I still have a hard time putting it into words. The game is great, but I've played a lot of great games, so why this? Why I? I think I finally managed to narrow it down. Heart. Everything in I has heart, all of it, clearly a product of a team that loved working on it and put everything into making it a reality, and that love is reflected in the story. I is a story about love, about what it does for our relationship to others, and what people do to protect those that they care about. Despite the fantastical setup, I is a very human story, one that goes all kinds of places, one that will manage to resonate with the player personally at some point. I know it managed to resonate with me. I means love, and that's a very fitting title. With the release of I, Uchikoshi's time as a Spike Chunsoft employee is over, but the future is still looking bright. Uchikoshi hasn't shied away from the idea of an I sequel, and even if this is the last time we see this cast, I'm hoping that his new place at Tokyo Games gives him the resources to continue telling stories of this caliber. By the way, I haven't played World's End Club yet because I don't have a compatible iOS device, so should you have any piping hot takes about that game, please refrain from posting them in the comments, thank you. At least for now though, I the Somnium Files is a beautiful swan song signaling the end of an era, while also providing an exciting look into the future. I love I, and the only thing that's keeping me from really pouring my heart out about it is the fact that it is best enjoyed blind. If any of what I just said sounds interesting to you, then please buy I the Somnium Files. Switch, PS4, Steam, at list price, or on sale, it doesn't really matter, just play it. I promise you'll love it. But I don't really have anything else to say. I guess all that's left now is the outro, but let's spice it up. Play me out, A-Set.
Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you don't subscribe, you'll make me so aggro! Thank you so much for watching! See ya!